and Pwninstaller 1.0. And I'm going to let Will introduce himself, but he does have one request, and that's that you do not boo him off stage today.
We'll explain at a later slide. Funny story. So
here we go.
So, yep, this is Pwninstaller 1.0. My name is Will Shroeder. I go by the Twitter handle Harmjoy. I'm a security researcher and pen tester red teamer for a company called Varus Group LLC out of Northern Virginia, and I work in the Adaptive Threat Division over in that company. I am a co-founder and one of the main developers of a project called the Veil Framework. How many of you have actually heard of the Veil Framework? Okay, a few. So that's a lot better than it was a year ago when absolutely nobody had heard of it. So we're kind of branding it as, our goal is to bridge the gap in between red teaming and pen testing toolkits. So it started with a tool called Veil Evasion, which we presented on at ShmooCon this past year. And that tool is an open source kind of modular framework to generate AV evading executables. So I kind of started about a year and a half ago in this stuff, didn't really know anything. So all the efforts up until this point are about a year and a half of like seeing what's out there, doing a little bit of original research, trying to build some tool sets and stuff like that. So I co-wrote Veil Evasion. I wrote a kind of delivery tool called Veil Catapults, and recently I wrote a tool called Veil PowerView, which is a PowerShell-based kind of network or domain situational awareness tool. I presented BSides Austin a few months ago on the Cortana attack scripting language, and I got accepted to DEF CON, which I was pretty stoked about. Going to be releasing a new tool called Veil Pillage, which is kind of a post-exploitation, same modular type of format that ties in with the rest of the framework. So real quick, kind of what we'll cover today. Don't have too many slides, but I kind of go, at least I think, reasonably into the technical weeds. Hopefully you have a really good understanding of exactly what Pwninstaller is, how it works, and how you can modify it. So we'll kind of start with why we use it, what Pwninstaller is, a little bit of background. Then I'll go through kind of the initial thing that led to this entire project. There was a particular bug in Veil Evasion we couldn't quite figure out for a little bit, so I'll trace through exactly how we solved it and how that resulted in this effort. I'll go really in depth on how Pwninstaller works. I'll talk a little bit about this project that's released, Pwninstaller, which in 20 seconds is an obfuscated Pwninstaller loader, and then I'll take some questions. And hopefully you guys don't boo me off the stage. Real quick caveat, this is a proof of concept based on an idea. Like I said, I'll detail the problem that prompted this, walk through the solution, show you the POC. These are the kind of talks I normally like to go to, where I try to at least kind of explain how I went about the problem instead of just saying, here's a tool, let me just run it. I'm sure there's a better way to do this, but it seemed like an interesting concept and I want to get it out there. Really, I love talking about this stuff, so hit me up after, DM me on Twitter, email me, whatever. These slides have actually, I tweeted them out under the hashtag BSidesBoston, or whatever, the BSidesBoston hashtag, and under my Twitter account, Harmjoy, so in case you want to follow along or look at them after. So, Pwninstaller 101. If you're not aware of what it is, it's straight from their website. It's a program that converts or packages Python programs into standalone executables. The main site is pwninstaller.org. And it's been around since, I think, early 2000s. It's been about 10 years or so. It's pretty well established. They're on I forget what version they're on, but it's an active project. It's a really cool effort. They do great work. And essentially, it packages up Python scripts into OS X, Linux, or Windows self-extracting executables. And this lets developers distribute projects without relying on an existing Python installation. Like I said, I'll go over exactly how it does this. So, pen testers started to realize that a few years ago we could use this to package up malicious scripts for shellcode injectors, for stagers, and all that kind of fun stuff. And this is very advantageous, and it still gets by a lot of antivirus, because a lot of legitimate projects use Pwninstaller. There's actually a list up there. Dropbox uses a modified version of it, which I think the distributed binary for a fairly good number of projects will actually use it. Like Volatility, I believe, is listed, things like that. And then Dave Kennedy released a tool called PyInjector 2012, which is based off of, I'm sure I'll mess up this pronunciation, but W.C. Schmendel's original post. The original post is there at the bottom. And Dave Kennedy's post under Trusted Site is right there. And basically, this was a way of using Python and C types to inject shellcode into memory. And Set, from Dave Kennedy's Set tool, actually uses a kind of little bit of an obfuscated version of PyInjector in some of its kind of like phishing payload delivery type of paths. And after this caught on for the past 2 or 3 years, has been a pretty popular vector with pen testers. Because up until a few years ago, we really didn't have to worry about antivirus. Like the stock Metasploit stagers in the framework would very often just get by anything and stuff was terrible. So finally, as Avia started to catch up, people moved towards this method. So Pwninstaller and Veil Evasion. Veil Evasion sets up Pwninstaller under Wine on Kali Linux, so Python payloads can be compiled up natively to Windows EXEs. And this generation is completely transparent to the user. You don't have to take files and drop them onto a separate Windows install and do all that kind of stuff. It allows for the dynamic generation of Windows payloads on a single monolithic attack platform. And even though a lot of this stuff with Veil Evasion wasn't revolutionary, we weren't claiming credit for these techniques, but we feel like we really kind of packaged it up into a really nice, easy to use framework. It was also modular to where you could write your own, say like Python type stagers or something, drop in the module, and then take advantage of the compilation, take advantage of all that kind of stuff. So one of the methods in Veil Evasion for some of the Python payloads uses void pointer casting for shellcode injection. And this is kind of, whenever you see like tutorials and stuff on how to write shellcode, this is like the most basic way. You basically just hop to the execution for it. But in some of these payloads, this can fail because the memory location is not explicitly marked as executable. So alternatively, the other way that people tend to inject shellcode is using like virtual alloc, RTL move memory, like create thread and all that kind of stuff to like manually allocate a chunk of memory as read-write executable. When you do it like this, you kind of have to rely on the address space of, or the stack and heap space for the executable to already be marked as RWX. So most systems tend to use a opt-in dep enforcement policy. So if these executables opt into dep or data execution protection, or data execution prevention, then you'll get an access violation when you try to run this stuff. So like I said, if the executable opts in, void pointer casting will fail. So we ran into this really kind of weird Dale bug that we couldn't figure out for a little bit, to where Python void pointer payloads would work as Python files. Like if you just took the file and put it on a Windows box and ran it, it would work fine. It'd be great. But if you packed it up into a Pwninstaller exe, it would fail with an access violation. Although it wouldn't tell us that at first, we had to go through and put the debugging and everything. And after we tracked it down and figured out that even though the Python exe use of Pwninstaller is dep enabled, or it does opt into dep, the resulting Pwninstaller payloads don't actually opt into this protection. We're like, this doesn't really make any sense if it's using the existing Python exe, like kind of what's going on here. There's a post down there, Veil Evasion /dep Pwninstaller, that kind of goes over this in more detail, which I think the site changed to veilframework.com dep Pwninstaller. So that's kind of what started investigating the really kind of inner workings of Pwninstaller, so we could track down this bug. So next few slides, I'm really kind of going into the weeds exactly how Pwninstaller works. So it uses a C data construct, it's a C archive data structure to package up the Python DLL, any necessary libraries, and your target script, whatever you're using to actually run, whether it's a Dropbox program, whether it's a shellcode injector, PyInjector, whether it's a native Metasploit stager, whatever it is. And that C archive operates basically like a compressed zip container. Then the archive is attached to the end of a little launcher executable. I'll have a diagram here in a second. And there's several versions of this little launcher executable. We use one that's included with Pwninstaller called runw.exe. We also have run.exe. Run.w is the windowed version, for like a Windows GUI version. We use this so then we can hit a flag that actually says like hide the window, so all the execution for whatever we're doing is completely transparent to the user. Otherwise, like a console pops up and does all that kind of stuff. So all in all, like there's only one little launcher exe that we ever actually use when we're packing up stuff for Veil Evasion. This is a quick diagram. I had to recreate it from their website. This is the original source. But you see up there, like the little launch.exe, this is the entire C archive that, like, everything here is the Python DLL. This is where your actual script is and all that kind of stuff. So this is what's actually extracted to disk temporarily. Then that's registered. A couple of the functions are exposed and all that kind of stuff, and then this is launched. So again, on execution, the launcher executable decompresses it to a temporary location. loads the Python 15 DLL using load library DXE, maps out the entry points to the Python DLL for all the necessary methods, sets up all the environment, starts the Python process, imports all the necessary modules, whatever is included. Like we actually have like AES modules included, encryption and all that kind of whatever stuff or whatever you need, networking type things. And then the extracted script is run using this expose DLL function, pyrun simple string. So in English, a minimal Python environment's extracted, the components are set up, the scripts run. And it's really nice in that you can run Python scripts without having Python installed on target machine. Probably sounds like I'm repeating myself. So all in all, the depth opt-in policy is determined by that little launcher and not by the Python interpreter like we thought it was. So the next step, we're like, okay, let's recompile the Python launcher with one that doesn't opt into these types of protections. Luckily, Pwninstaller is open source. Again, there's that link where I talked about, we actually go into detail how you can recompile it on your own on a Windows system and actually get this little launcher that doesn't opt in. But, oh yeah, sorry. And it's all in the avail bug. So the pre-compiled versions of these two little things are in this Pwninstaller/support/loader, whatever it is. And the source files are actually included under Pwninstaller source. You can grab them off of GitHub. I think the version we're using is actually like one, because we started using it about a year ago. We kept with like 2. something. I think they're already at 3.0. And the run W is the one we want to regenerate for Windows executables. So the binaries actually use this really wonky build system called WAF. And they have like these W scripts there, and like it took a while figuring out how the heck this actually worked. But you can add this particular flag right there, link flags, and X compatibility turns off dep. Give you the line and everything, and in that blog post we tell you detailed, like this is how you actually do it. This will instruct the Visual Studio linker to turn off the opt-in dep compatibility. So, awesome, there's this like little launcher, it's great, it lets us run more injection methods on more more environments and different machines. But our project is supposed to be focused on evading antivirus. And if you have a static, uniquely compiled like little executable, it's a great way of being like, hey, you can write a signature, even just a static signature, just for this, and it will only be veil evasion payload. So we're like that. That's why we didn't actually include a recompiled version with the tool. We just told people how to kind of do it themselves because it would just be really kind of throwing softball to any vendor that's like, oh, let me just MD5 the first 200K of this, and then you actually see it's a failed thing. So kind of dove into this a lot more and figured out that you can actually recompile the Pwninstaller launcher on Kali itself. Instead of just having like running Pwninstaller and packaging everything up, we can actually recompile it. It's not simple, but there's a way to do it using MinGW to get all the linkers and the GCC and everything like that. There's several lines, and I had to like extract it out of this stupid WAF thing or whatever. But this makes it trivial to like make some small changes, recompile it, and you can at least defeat like a straight up SHA-1 or something like that in case, say, this is submitted to virus total or whatever else. At least it's pretty easy to change it. So I started thinking, okay, now they figure out how to recompile this. Why don't we make it just like a little bit harder to flag on and start to introduce a little bit of obfuscation. So the first thing, there's a pretty small number of files actually that you need to recompile this. Utils, LaunchMain, an extract of like zlib to do the little C archive extract kind of thing. But it's only under 2,000 lines straight out of the gate from the GitHub stuff. So like, okay, isolated that, found what was needed, like let's see what we can actually do to do some unique generation. And the initial goal was to make SSD, which I'll explain in a couple slides, as useless as possible against families of our generated launcher. So my initial thought process was, okay, let's strip out any unnecessary code, so anything for like the OSX, AIX, Linux, whatever compatibility, that can all go. Randomize, shuffle anything we can, include a bunch of random libraries, all that kind of stuff, like put padding in, mix everything up. Started, but it's still pretty basic. This didn't exactly take that long to do. It was just, the very first step. But like, okay, there's whatever, I have to have my stupid Billy Mays memes. We can go a little further and have fun with anything that does like really basic dynamic analysis. So we actually kind of this is the approach that we use in our C interpreter payloads in the framework. So we have, in a really quick sidebar, instead of just shellcode injectors, we have straight higher level interpreter stagers. So instead of just taking MSFNM generated shellcode and injecting it in, you can actually take these API calls in a higher level language, write a native Metasploit stager. So, if you're interested in that all, which maybe there's like 2 of you that are, either email me or watch our presentation at ShmooCon, which is AV Evasion with the Veil framework, and we go into that in detail. But so with the C stuff, we figured out several months ago when we released this stuff that C is the hardest thing to actually do obfuscation on. Python's fairly easy because it's all wrapped up, and it's essentially kind of like Pwninstaller is almost like a legitimate packer kind of thing because it's putting in the zip stuff or zip archive. But with C, you have to try a little harder because it's about you're not writing straight assembly, but it's about as bare bones as you can get. So we instituted this type of obfuscation where we had a lot of fake dummy methods that are like nested, interspersed all throughout the code. There's a whole lot of processing, and it doesn't end up doing anything logically to the program, but it'll spike the CPU for a while, and if you try to look at like an idle tree of the program, like it messes everything up. So really super basic type of AV stuff that just immediately tries to run a few frames or see what it does. This seems to be pretty effective to where I don't think these interpreter stagers are still caught, even though they're open source and they've been in the framework that's now semi-well known for 6+ months. But so we took some of this obfuscation and I was like, okay, I'll just implement the same kind of idea for this Pwninstaller stuff. So I think if you look through the code, it's all this like mallocs and all this string processing and a bunch of nested functions and all that kind of nasty stuff. And then finally, the Pwninstaller icon is pretty recognizable. Someone on Twitter actually asked us if we could, people bug us about changing it all the time instead of just looking at the little flags and realizing it's not hard to change. But now with this Pwninstaller thing, there's like a folder that has a whole bunch of randomized icons that are all freely licensed and all that stuff. So randomly choose from this, you can replace them if you want. So the end result of Pwninstaller is every time this generator runs, obfuscated code for every single source file that's needed is generated up. Just the variable, even though like just randomizing the name and stuff doesn't really do anything unless you think the symbols are strict. But like on kind of this logical obfuscation is added into everything dynamically as well. A randomized icon is chosen. MinGW is used to compile everything up to a new little loader, and that's copied in to the correct location on Kali where your Pwninstaller is located. So it's pretty transparent. This is actually standalone for Pwninstaller. It's also being integrated into Veil Vision that I can hopefully do maybe a short demo or something here just a little bit. So SSDeep. If you're not aware with what SSDeep is, it's a kind of basic fuzzy hashing tool, which the academic way is saying context-triggered piecewise hashes. So on their page, they say it can match inputs that have homologies. So it's a biology term, which is a fancy way of saying what's the degree of shared ancestry for this particular kind of like pool of information. Originally, it's for genetics. So this tool, which was born from some like spam processing detection type stuff, you can run it in a large set of files, and it does these like kind of like piecewise hashes, and it can basically tell a degree of similarity in the code base, at least for the executable, the raw compiled bytes. So as far as, like, I'm not a reverser, but I have a few reverser friends, and they kind of suggested this just for a first kind of pass at this stuff. A lot of times they'll throw samples through SSD, especially when you have to triage a large number of executables. And I've heard different numbers, but one of my friends had said that if 2 files hit with a 90% similarity, then they tend to usually conclude that it's kind of like a similar malware family, or at least they were related. Maybe they had the same initial generator or something like that. So that's kind of all I really knew for like kind of easy basic static analysis stuff, so that's what I ran with. So I ran this code 1,000 times, generated 1,000 different little loaders, not the full Pwninstaller thing, just the little executable on the front. So a little combinatorial math, that's 1,000 choose 2, which is 499,500 possible combinations of one loader to another loader. So out of all those pairings, 74% scored 30 or better, 46% scored 50 or better, and 7% scored 70 or better, and none of them scored 90 or better. So at least from kind of what I understood in my limited knowledge, that these loader pairings seem to none of them seem to score as a similar malware family. This is a graph of all the comparisons. You see a big spike around 50 or so, a little bit around 75, I think. So yeah, this is just kind of like the first pass at all this obfuscation, but it seemed to be relatively effective at generating a statically different little executable. So in plain English, each Pwninstaller loader is reasonably unique from a basic malware static analysis perspective. Competent reversers will be able to figure out what's going on almost no time. I'm not trying to, write some APT malware, but hopefully our point with this is just showing that static signatures for AV detection is pretty useless, and that's the whole thing with our project. We've been pushing forward, saying AV vendors have, kind of conceptually failed. The thing with Symantec that just came out recently saying, yes, we failed, we admit it, our product is terrible, which is funny because Symantec is actually one of the better products we go up against. But static signatures are dead. That's why we wanted to show with this tool and now with the Pwninstaller thing that every time you generate a new veil payload, it's pretty reasonably different. You can't just write a static signature for it. If it gets submitted to virus total, like each SHA-1 hash is going to be different every time. So that's our main kind of goal. It's not to, solve, 100% some crazy whatever dynamic crypto or something like that. We're just trying to piecemeal get there. And the first thing we're trying to demonstrate is static signatures are terrible. I'm sure there's other better obfuscation methods for any old school malware writers who happen to be in the audience or watching at some point or something like that. If you think there's a better way to do it, please do a poll, take my code. You don't have to credit me as GPL, you can do whatever you want with it. But I kind of want to get this idea out there of like, okay, if some of these AV vendors have started to flag on the little Pwninstaller loader, which a few of them have, why don't we make it just a little harder for them? Raise the bar just a little bit. So Pwninstaller 1.0, there's a blog post on my site about it. The code's up on GitHub for Harmjoy Pwninstaller, and it's in the development branch of Veil Evasion. It's going to hit on 5/15. So every month we do something called V-Day, where we release new payload modules for the framework. We've been doing this for, I think, like 6, 7 months, 8 months. We still have enough research for like another year of releases. We have some still cool stuff coming up around like the DEF CON timeframe and like the DerbyCon timeframe and things like that. So all Python payloads now can utilize a dynamically generated Pwninstaller loader by choosing the option. And I'll show you, I guess, what it looks like in the little Python compilation thing. The default's still Pwninstaller. It's because legitimate products do use Pwninstaller, so like there's some benefits for that. But if you're at a client that can like throw up custom signatures or something like that, and you want to have something that dynamically changes, some of these are going to work in some situations, some won't work in others. We just want to give people options for what they want to do. Recap, Pwninstaller, some awesome stuff. It'll hopefully extend the lifetime of Veil Evasion payloads by making static signatures reasonably difficult to write. This is what I mentioned before. When I tried to talk about it on the internet, the response was, this is script kiddie garbage that will harm users of Pwninstaller when AVs flag it without benefiting anyone who matters. I hope you get booed off the stage of BSides. And that was the internet. So I'm really disappointed. Maybe you guys will boo me off the stage at the end. Or maybe you're just nice and you'll come tell me I'm an idiot afterwards. So. And this is my 20-second shameless sidebar. 1 second.
By the way, we're not actually hacking the NASA.
We actually got to hack into NASA at my job, which is the coolest thing I've ever done. So I had to play my hack all the things. But we have a really cool team with a bunch of OSCPs, OSCEs. It's a Veris Group Adaptive Threat Division. We're based out of Virginia. We do red teaming, pen testing. We actually have a pool of research hours, which we don't only just have to do this on our own. I don't know, many companies are like, hey, here's a whole bunch of time. Go research some cool stuff and do whatever you want, and then go talk at cons about it, like here. So it's a great group. If you're interested at all, hit me up. I'm going to go to the little resume room thing afterwards in case you're interested. And then any questions, my Twitter, my email, there's a blog post about it. The slides got tweeted out. The GitHub's right there, or you can pull in Veil Evasion. The development branch now and the master branch will hit on the 15th. And sorry, I'm a little short, but that's about it. I don't know if there's any questions or stuff about AV Evasion in general, or about the ethics of it, or about Pwninstaller or Pwninstaller.
Two questions. First of all, so the Pi2exe, is it using the same method?
It uses the same kind of method. We couldn't get that running on, the question was, does Heidi DXE use the same kind of method as Pwninstaller? And I haven't dived into kind of the guts of Heidi DXE quite as much, but the only way we could get it running was on Windows. We couldn't get it running on Kali natively. So it'll spit out all the setup files and stuff if you want to do it, but you have to drop it in a Windows machine. Same kind of concept though with stealth extracting zip archive. We just don't default to it, but we had that originally in, and we just, no reason to take it out in case. We know a few people use it sometimes, but it's forensically just a little bit different than Pwninstaller.
Second question, if you could go back to the stack.
The files that are being loaded. Yeah. So you mentioned that the EXE is being generated. What about the rest of the Python DLL?
We haven't dynamically done that stuff yet. That might be the next thing up. Like I said, this is just the first version, kind of getting it out there. The stuff with these are like the Python 1.5 is a known good type of DLL, to where I don't think, because some AV vendors have started to flag on the little Pwninstaller loader because people started using it maliciously. I don't really know how they could flag on the Python DLL itself, because that would probably destroy a lot of installations across a large number of clients. But and this stuff is all zipped up anyway, so if it's sitting there on disk, unless they're doing dynamic analysis, they can extract the C archive, inspect all this stuff, and then look at the script and do all those types of things. There's not really a way for them to get that out unless they're doing proper behavioral analysis, which hopefully they move towards. No. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Yeah. Any other? Like I said, the slides are up. Any other questions at all? Hit me up after, or talk to me online. Shoot me an email or something. I love talking about this stuff, AV evasion in general, or offensive type tool sets and all those types of things. So, thank you guys. Appreciate it.